Under workshops, we have an update on the review of the draft environmental impact report for the high-speed rail project.
Mr. Tandy, please.
Honorable Mayor and members of City Council, my comments are going to be fairly brief, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jim Eggert and Raul Rojas. We are in a 60-day period under which we are allowed to make comments on the draft EIR, which is being circulated by the High-Speed Rail Authority. Normally, our commentary on draft EIRs is done by planning, and in typical cases, it's not something of great substance to the city. In this case, due to the nature of what is proposed and the absence of mitigation contained in the plan, the issue is of great importance to the city. Our opportunity to comment on the draft EIR is very significant in that it preserves our ability to take action if, when the final EIR is adopted, our concerns have not been adequately responded to. So we have to approach this carefully and thoroughly. A few comments about the actuality of what is being proposed and what is being studied, because they're different. Under study is a section of high-speed rail in this phase of the environmental document that runs from the Fresno station to the Bakersfield station. The adoption of the environmental documents by the High-Speed Rail Authority allows for them then to adopt a specific plan line at a later date, which would impact the value of all of the properties and the prospective future of all of the properties on that alignment. And that's the study area. They don't have enough money to get into town. They have enough money to build tracks from somewhere in the area of Borden to somewhere north of Bakersfield at a site that has not been specified. It may be no further south than Cochrane. It may be in the area of Shafter. These are only tracks. They are not electrified for high-speed rail operation. There is no train in the current budget. There is no heavy maintenance facility because there are no trains in the current budget or program. The documents are at a 15% design status, and therefore the precise identification of land areas to be impacted may be subject to some change as that is taken forward. We read this past week that a committee in the United States Congress cut out all funding for future high-speed rail, some $7 billion. The state of California and the federal government have combined to put forward the funds that will build the track from Borden to somewhere north of Bakersfield. The state of California has to issue bonds, which were authorized in a referendum a few years ago for that purpose, but they do not have the money to pay the debt on. When they issue the bonds, they will go into a higher level of budget imbalance than they have currently been in, and we know what the legislature's tendency is to do when their budget is out of balance, which is prey upon the cities and counties in the state. One has to wonder what the logic is of building a track from Borden to somewhere north of Bakersfield when the sources of funding to extend it to any two logical termini seem not to exist. Nonetheless, despite the fact that the budget shortfall is there, the adoption of the documents is still meaningful to the city, again, because it allows at some future date for the project to go through, and the city facilities and other community facilities that Mr. Eggert and Mr. Rojas are going to discuss will be threatened. We have sent a letter to the High-Speed Rail Authority asking for a 30-day extension in the comment period because of the complexity of the document and because of the complexity of the document, the general public has great trouble in interpreting it. We actually have to have a team of planners and engineers go through the document in order to prepare the comments that will be for you this evening. We think an additional 30 days is reasonable. We also believe that some other entities in our area, including Kern County and perhaps Bakersfield High School, will submit similar requests for 30-day extensions. We don't know whether that will be honored or not. The comment period ends on October 13th, and we only have one other council meeting between then and now, so we are in the midst of doing our work, but it is not complete, and I'm not sure whether we will have an opportunity to return to you when the work is complete. But we wanted to give you a feel for what we are finding in review of this document this evening, and to indicate to you some of the concerns that we believe we need to bring forward. I will note that we have had many, many meetings with the High-Speed Rail Authority over the last 2 years or so, that they have been cordial meetings, and they have listened to our concerns on almost all of the items that will be presented to you. We were shocked when the draft came out that the concerns we had been talking about had expressed, in certain cases you can't do this, in certain cases if you do this, these will have to be the subsequent actions, that almost all of those things were ignored and not responded to in the document. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim Eggert for comment.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good evening. Before I start, decided to give you a kind of a visual of what we're going through. Usually with EIRs, most of you have been sort of familiar with, this is the typical. These are shopping centers. This is sort of the size of the document. Somewhat usable. I know there's technical information in here. This pile over here, and you need to eat your Wheaties in the morning to lift it all at the same time. This is the draft of the rail proposal between Fresno and Bakersfield. The main document is over 1,500 pages. We have a technical document behind that and a series of maps. So it gives you kind of a sense of the volume of information that has been placed out there. And certainly, as Mr. Tandy had pointed out, if you are a member of the public who normally would not see these, this is a very imposing document. So I just wanted to give you a feel for kind of the difference from what your past experience in EIR. As a result of this document, staff has, we put together a team made up of planning, property management, public works, TRIP, EDCD, to try to break down this document into our areas of expertise. As I mentioned, it's a large document. It's confusing, I think, to the average person looking at it. The sections that describe Bakersfield are intertwined in various chapters, so you have to hunt for, if you're looking at Bakersfield, for example, those specific items, or if you're looking for whatever item you're trying to prepare. As mentioned, we feel that there was insufficient time for public review. We have asked for a 30-day period, but we are on track to make sure that our comments are into the authority by the October 13th date, unless that is extended. Mitigation, which is usually a large part of the EIR process, needs to be part of that final. In the draft, it's very, in some cases, non-existent or very vague. It is not to the level of detail that we are accustomed to seeing, or you would be accustomed to seeing, is looking at a project. So I'm going to go through some major impacts to the city, Rabobank Arena, TRIP projects and such. The EIR places at risk millions of dollars of city assets, and I'll cover all of those. As I mentioned, there is little or no mitigation to a number of the effects that have been identified in that document. In the administrative report, we've noted that there are two alignments, and if you recall, we started with a red and blue alignment. If you remember the meeting we had where we had a number of Bakersfield High School alumni, they were concerned about the blue alignment that ran near the high school. There was the red alignment that ran up near Mercy Hospital. What's been confusing in the document and for the public to follow, including staff for a little while, they did not use that terminology in the draft. The blue alignment is now referred to as the BNSF alternative. The red alignment is referred to as Bakersfield South. However, in the maps, one set of maps doesn't have any labeling, and the maps that we will have later in this presentation do not show those labels at all, so you don't know which one is which unless you're familiar with the routes. Others refer to it as B1 and B2, so it just adds another layer of confusion to just somebody trying to follow the routes. One of the major issues that we've identified early on is that the California Rail Authority is a state agency. However, they're following a process that is following a federal EIS standard. And yes, they are getting funding for some of that from the federal level, but we believe as a state agency, as the lead agency, they should be held to the higher scrutiny and expertise and standards under CEQA, which is the state Environmental Quality Act. And there is a big difference between that, but our feeling is that they should be following the higher standard. There's only one copy, other than the copy that we have, and I believe Kern County received a copy to the public. There's only one of these copies, and it's at Beale Library. And we're talking about a metropolitan area of 500,000 people. For others, if you don't go to the library and look at the hard copy, which is really the easiest way to look at it, if you can download it on your computer, again, that's a large document. Plus, not everybody owns a computer, or they do have them available on CD. But again, you're presupposing that everybody has access to a computer to be able to look at the document and compare the maps, which is hard to do in a lot of cases. In general, you try to keep an EIR and EIS at a manageable level so that the public and decision makers can easily reference documents, and they tend to follow, as a guideline, a 300-page limit. Obviously, this is over 5 times that size. There's also a lot of technical information. There's a lot of engineering drawings that the average person is not going to understand terminology, is not going to understand how the maps were put together. We also noticed that the notice to property owners was very, very vague. Those of you that have seen city notices are very descriptive. It tells the person you live within 300 feet of this project and we provide a map so that you kind of understand, gosh, there's something happening around my house. The notice that was sent to the property owners in the city, received a number of these because we're also a property owner, just said that the rail is in the area. It does not say that it's impacting your property. It does not give you an idea that it's the footprint of the rail might be going over your property and removing your house or your business. The notice provides a map, but the map shows the alignment between, it's a small-scaled map with Fresno and Bakersfield and the line between the two. So you can sense that the scale of it is not going to give you any idea of how close it is to your house. And lastly, that's been commented earlier, and I believe on Friday we provided some background information in response to the Rail Authority about the east side of Bakersfield. Has been the rail stopped the study at Baker Street. We do know there's 2 alignments that head further east, but there's no maps. There's really no discussion at length to those businesses and homes past Baker Street. So those individuals are certainly at a disadvantage. There's some discussion in the EIR, but it's in a completely different section than any other discussion. So you really would have to do some hunting to find out where that was and what those issues were. The major impacts that I'll go through quickly will be to those to TRIP, redevelopment, our general traffic circulation in the metro area, the city's facilities, and then some more significant community facilities. Regarding the TRIP project, West Side Parkway, the map in front of you, we tried to keep the blue and red line consistent with how we started this many, many months ago when the authority gave us red and blue lines. So the blue line at the bottom is what is referred to as B1. That is the one that eventually goes by Bakersfield High School. and the red alignment is the one that would eventually go by Mercy Hospital. And then at the convention center, they cross, and then the blue becomes on the north side and the red becomes on the south side. But the meandering line is the West Side Parkway. So as you can see, the impact to the parkway is by both alignments. Now, they're saying in the EIR that rail is going to go above that facility. And in some cases, we're talking an elevation that begins at 40 feet and goes up as high as pretty close to 80 feet as you get to Highway 99 to cross over all of these facilities. As we move to the Centennial Corridor, get my little arrow here. Here is the Mohawk connection. They do have electrified station alternatives. This one's over part of our corporation yard. This area underneath all of these lines is where Moo Creamery, Paragon Salon is located. And as you can see, the alignment is impacting the corridor not only here, but also ramps connecting to 99 for this particular alignment of the Centennial Corridor. And these will be issues that we will be making specific comments on to the Rail Authority with our response. Redevelopment projects, South Mill Creek is affected really by both alignments. The alignment to the south is now what we would call the red alignment, if you recall. That actually removes most of the new city, I don't know if it's City Place or whatever the name is, apartments that are just coming online. We found this rather interesting because one of the comments made in the document about high-speed rail and the area just to the east is where they have station locations, is that they call it transit-oriented design, where you would encourage high-density housing near your station, mixed use near your station. So we found it very interesting that we have a typical transit-oriented design type of community that would be eliminated by the rail. General traffic circulation, these would be affected by the station location, and we do have two stations that correlate with the alignments. One is a little further south towards California, one is a little closer to the Amtrak station, but they're both on the south side of the tracks. Those are familiar. There's a small street, Hayden Court, number of businesses. That would actually be closed. That's one of the items mentioned in the EIR that would be affected. On the west side of town, there were comments on the map of closure of Palm Avenue. Now, this is in the county's jurisdiction, but Palm Avenue, under our circulation plan, is a collector road that links Callaway to all of the arterial roads further to the west. Nothing mentioned as to this street continuing through, so we presume that when they said closure, it'll just be cul-de-sac or dead end on each side. So it puts a gap into a major collector road in the northwest area of town and connections to the north-south arterials. Issues that we saw along the alignment, this is coming along the BSNF railway as you're coming north from the Shafter area. They incorrectly noted that they would have a grade separation at Arena Road, which is incorrect. They failed to show any type of connection to the Renfro-Jenkins grade separation. So another item that we will be noting is a correction that's needed to the EIR. But as you can see, there's these types of errors that keep cropping up that we're trying to make sure we pick up all of those as much as we can. Also, this alignment up in the northwest, an important link for future is the West Beltway. They did not account for any grade separation or crossing of the rail at all with that roadway. Getting back to the downtown area, effects to the convention center. We have a pedestrian bridge that exists that the rail authority said would be relocated. Believe it would be initially maybe to the east, but we really don't know where it would go exactly. The southerly alignment affects the majority of the parking area for the convention center. The authority has not made specific mitigation of the temporary effect to events at the arena, permitted events at the arena for parking, what will happen to parking, can you park under the rail, is it gone forever? Obviously that's a major impact to booking events at Rabobank if parking is taken out. It also affects the northerly alignment, affects some of the loading area. We are not clear on the entirety of that, but still it's an impact to the functionality of the arena. Going back to the west, this addresses the one of the alignments, pretty much takes out all of the city's corporation yard. That's a major facility. There is no discussion as to where that would be relocated. We've given you an idea of there's a lot of function that is happening out there. We have our operations, we have fleet services, we have solid waste, the graffiti, general services. There's a large garage for repair of all those vehicles out there. Those of you who've been out there, there's a lot of buildings, and it's a very large facility that would have to go someplace. And again, it has not really been dealt with in the EIR as far as what's the mitigation other than we will compensate the city. Closer in at City Hall, the northerly alignment actually would remove the police garage, the communication center that's along, I think that's 15th Street. It would also remove about half of the parking for City Hall South. The aquatic center, the southerly alignment affects that more than the northerly, but both do affect parking. And again, that parking is used not only in conjunction with the aquatic center, but as additional parking for the convention center and arena. Impacts on the community, and we're just getting into some of these. The alignment, this would be the red alignment. City Credit Union, obviously there's a number of other businesses along 16th Street. I know there's a newer project in there that's kind of has a mix of businesses. As you move closer to Mercy Hospital, it would require relocation of the Mercy Medical Office. I think it's a 3- or 4-story building that's right there. Plus the alignment of the train is very, very close to the hospital. Out at the west again, you're familiar with the Bakersfield Commons project, although they haven't started anything yet. It's a mixed-use development, a very large mixed-use development that receives land use entitlements. Both of the alignments affect their property. We don't know how that's going to affect their actual development, but I know that the property owners are as concerned as to how that's going to affect their future development. The neighborhood Windsong, just to the west of that, there are 2 streets that the southerly alignment will actually remove pretty much all of the houses along 2 streets. Last we were aware, most of the residents were not aware of that until the media had gone out there. Probably don't need to dwell too much on Bakersfield High. We've heard a lot of that. The southerly alignment actually removes all of their facilities north of 14th Street, including the Industrial Arts Building. Just some general comments and things that we've noted to give you kind of a sense of what's how this is impacting the community. The blue alignment is affecting, this is just the footprint, so our feeling is the impact of the rail is actually probably a much larger figure, but these are the homes directly impacted that would have to be relocated. So we're looking at 239 homes, so we're talking about 700 people that would be relocated, 282 businesses that are comprised of 1,300 employees and 7 churches. The red line, a little bit less on the homes and the businesses, an increase of 8 churches that would be affected. And these are what they're saying in their report are actually displaced and would be relocated. That's quite a few homes and businesses and people that are affected by the rail alignment. We did notice that there was some financial compensation noted for parkland replacement. Some would be to the city parks, some would be to north of the river. The EIR is very inconclusive about which parks are affected and what the compensation is. We've noted that biological impacts have not really been addressed in compliance with our habitat conservation plan. Those will be notes that we will be providing back to them, comments. Visual impacts is a very big one. We're talking about an elevated train through most of the metropolitan area. As I said, will range from 40 feet in the air to 80 feet. City Hall North, 5th floor, is around 65 feet or so. So we're talking at that elevation, and that you'll see from a long distance. The visual impact is also going to split your community. Just like a freeway, you're going to have posts. There's going to be different sides of that rail. So you've kind of put a division through there, not only visually, but just being able to interact back and forth between neighborhoods. The analysis of noise along the Kern River Parkway hasn't been addressed. We've also noted that they have not done an awful lot in terms of significant historic resources. State Route 204 is one of those. I don't believe I've seen anything related to Bakersfield High School per se as any type of historical analysis. Mr. Tandy covered some of these as far as the project status. The budget to complete the link doesn't really exist between really major cities. There is no budget for train. We're talking about building track, but there's not a train. There's no electrification. Future funding is unknown. We do note that there are some cost estimates, and business plan is supposed to be out by the authority in October, but it will become after the comment period is closed. So again, you won't have a way to compare the business plan with the EIR to see how that actually works together. Initial construction segment, as we've noted in the administrative report, really appears that it's connecting 2 points that I don't want to, we can say nowhere to nowhere, but they're just points out in the rural areas. There's no station to them, and then they just fold back into the existing rail network. So eventually the adoption of the environmental documents, and we are treating all of these comments very seriously. There are a lot of major impacts to the city. We want to make sure that they're addressed as much as possible, legally as much as possible, so that we can preserve our status and make sure that the rail authority addresses what our concerns are. And I'm open to any questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rojas, do you have comments on this item?
Mr. Mayor, no. Mr. Ager covered all the whole presentation. Thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, has it been said, or are they giving us an idea when we do, if it happens and when it happens, approximately how many trains will be going by per day at the beginning, and of course then it will be increasing as time goes on, but I haven't heard, it's interesting to try to visualize that.
I'm probably going to give the wrong answer, but I've seen data in general about 2035 when they anticipate full operation. And I seem to recall they will have some trains that go through town and don't stop. I think one every half hour or something like that. You also have trains that do stop. So not every train will actually be stopping in town. Some will go through. We can certainly provide those numbers. I just can't recall if they are that specific in the EIR about it yet.
Right. Well, a significant number then.
Yes.
That certainly gives me an idea. And Jim, in the end, if this continues on, will we as a city and decision makers, are we going to have a whole lot we'll have input, but will we have influence?
I'll take that, Jim.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan, that's a very good question, and the best thing I can tell you is that our experience over the past 2 years has been we've given many comments. We've talked about design correction. We've given them ideas about how to perhaps intermingle the red and blue lines at a junction so that it didn't damage BHS or didn't damage our arena. We gave them specific ideas relative to how they could mitigate for the parking at the arena. They ignored all of it. You may recall in discussions of EIRs that we have undertaken that we get down to they're going to be an 8-foot-high sound wall from this limit to that limit. There are going to be 53 trees planted. We go into absolute definition of mitigation from greenhouse gases to property protection to sound, noise, lights, etc. And they didn't deal with hardly any of the comments we'd given them over 2 years. We've spoken to agricultural interests, to representatives of Bakersfield High School, and others who suffered the same experience. So, based on what has happened in the past, my answer to you would be it doesn't look like the things that are said to them are given much attention. You have no legal authority other than those of any property owner whose property is being taken to intervene in the matter. I would like to be more optimistic, but I have no experiential base for being optimistic in that regard.
Wow, that is interesting and that is scary. That is amazing. Now probably my last question. If this does continue on, when are they expecting, even approximately, for this to actually be in operation? And are they giving us an idea about that?
Councilmember Sullivan, they only have the money to build the track from somewhere in the area of Borden to somewhere north of Bakersfield. They don't have funding in the congressional pipeline or in the state pipeline for anything else. They speak optimistically about private sector investment or future changes from the federal or state government. I don't think, I will say this. I saw a quote from Mr. Van Ark, the CEO of the High Speed Rail Authority, who talked about, in a Los Angeles Times article, I think it was last Thursday, about perhaps our children or grandchildren inheriting the tracks that would be built in this phase, and his view of that was that it was a benefit, even if it was our children or our grandchildren. I don't think anybody can answer that question.
I see. So, excuse me, so it's way out there. That's certainly children and grandchildren, the younger generation. That's a good picture. Okay, well, thank you. That's interesting answers.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Mr. Eggert, you mentioned a possible financial impact. Did you come up with a ballpark figure? I didn't see that in your presentation. For blue or red line or cumulatively?
No, we don't really have a cumulative. We know what right now impacts are to some city facilities. We have not run any cumulative. I don't know. I have not seen anything in there in the literature so far. And I'll have to admit, we have not finished going through that document yet.
Fair enough.
Some of it I don't think they put a dollar figure on to our own impacts. So we certainly know cost to, like, the corporation yard, property, but then when you add relocation cost and some other things, that starts to raise that price, which I know they did not cover in there at all.
Gotcha. And for the noise study component, it sounds like I'm assuming it's not neglecting a noise study in the EIR, but is it like a generic noise study for how much noise the train makes when it goes a certain speeds, and then it just lacks like maybe a specific noise study as it travels through Bakersfield?
In their technical documentation, they do have a noise analysis, and they do use some decibel ranges. However, if you look at that and then look at the mitigation in the discussion of noise, they'll make reference to noise walls. But there isn't anything specific as to, well, what's the height of the wall, Is it along the entire stretch of the tract? Is it only a portion of the tract? There's a lot of instances where they say they will work with the local community on identifying that, which is, in reality, you're just pushing off that study to a later date when it should be analyzed in this document. So it's inconclusive in a lot of spots or incomplete.
Great. I would concur with that. And then last question and then one comment. Have we ever been threatened litigation by the state if we didn't comply with CEQA? I find it odd that the Attorney General threatened litigation on other counties and cities for not following certain components of CEQA, yet the state itself is not following CEQA?
Well, it's one of the points we're bringing up. And certainly we were aware, the state's been involved in other communities on general plan updates. They use the CEQA component as part of that. But usually most of our experience has been through private entities on CEQA challenges.
Gotcha.
To our own projects.
Thank you. And last comment, I'd like to just say thank you for all the work you're putting in. It's going to be a huge, significant impact to the community. So thank you for keeping an watchful eye on all the folks that are going to be impacted.
Well, you're welcome, and there's a lot of people involved, so it's not just me.
Thank you to the team.
Councilmember Solis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just had a clarification question real quick. So the draft EIR is out, and they extended the comment period, and how long is that extended for?
The EIR was originally, or comments were originally due September 28th, which would be your next meeting. Mm-hmm. The Rail Authority extended it 15 days to October 13th. And right now that is the deadline for comments.
Okay. And as it's extended to October 13th, we're going to obviously include some of the things that you pointed out, such as the impacts to, whether it's the red line or the blue line, or the impacts to East Bakersfield. When can we expect to get some answers back from them about those impacts? Are they going to mitigate for them? Or do they have alternatives? Are they going to look to us for those alternatives?
Following the normal process, they have to respond to all of the comments they receive. We presume there'll be more than just the City of Bakersfield commenting on the EIR. I don't know their schedule as far as the comments. We usually, even when we have EIRs prepared for projects in the city, it depends on how extensive they are. If you get a handful of comments, then you can respond pretty easily, and then that final is released for review. If they're more extensive, it'll just take them more time. Probably right now it's hard to gauge how long it's going to take them to respond to comments. Just from what we're hearing from other individuals and agencies that would be putting in comments, it may take them a little while, 2-3 months even.
Okay.
I don't know.
The authority will respond to each and every comment. So if we submit a list, such as like the bullet points in your presentation, and say, well, what is the impact to a street closure? What is the impact or the noise level for something going along the church for the person that spoke during public comment?
Yes, they will have to respond to each and every comment that we make.
Okay. That's it.
Just a point of clarification. The response can simply be something so noted. In other words, the high-speed rail is under, would argue to you that they're not under an obligation to provide the City Council with an answer to the question. It could simply be a, we've already addressed it, or see response to number 42A, subsection C, or, as I said, so noted. So I don't think we should expect answers to our questions.
Yeah. So we're hoping for answers, but even if we get those answers, we really don't have the authority at the local level to have the rail authority move in a certain direction. Is that correct?
Correct.
Disheartening. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Couch.
Thank you, Mayor. They're not following CEQA, so are they following NEPA? Is that what they're doing?
Yes. Basically, the structure of this document is a NEPA.
And so they're not, when we have an EIR on a project, we have to say the economic impacts based on the court decision from a few years ago. They do not have to do that in their process, or do they?
Well, when you look at CEQA, it actually talks about needing to wrap in some provisions of CEQA. Some of the economic impacts, even our own EIRs, other than the court cases, there's some things that you still don't have to address at great length. They have talked about them under NEPA in a very broad sense. So they're probably going to comment that, yes, we've addressed those economic impacts, and here is where it's listed. It's just that we may disagree on the specificity of how they've done that.
Vice Mayor Couch, most people believe the project is in California and that they should have followed CEQA as we do when we do our
And that's going to be one of your first comments, I presume. Okay. It also, I think it's fairly logical to conclude that the station location is very important, obviously, when determining the alignment, and therefore the impacts of that alignment. So I guess I'm posing the question, and I'd like you to consider, and you don't have to answer me right now, but should one of our comments be that perhaps a different station location in Bakersfield should be considered? You don't need to answer that right now, but I'd like maybe you could get back with me on that. And for the benefit of the public, I want to say this, but it's also, I want the council to think about this. I think this is a project that's going to happen or it's not, but we don't have the luxury of hoping it doesn't happen, because I think you've got a high-speed rail authority board and a staff that has been tasked to get a job done, and they're going to get it done. And so your challenge is going to be to protect the city as best you can, and that may be the way you described it earlier. At the same time, stay on good terms with them, because we need them to cooperate with us on several other projects like you mentioned. And that isn't going to be easy to do, but as you know, that's what your job is. Thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Thank you. Alan, one more quick question. It has been extended for 2 more weeks. Does that give you adequate time, do you feel, to do the review, and do you feel comfortable with that date?
Councilmember Sullivan, the answer to that is no. We don't believe it is. We have a couple of interested parties showing up here tonight. We had Mr. Eggers comment that the folks up there on Windsong don't seem to realize they're being taken out. Because of the complexity of the document and the difficulty to access it, we don't think the public has had a chance to digest it, understand it, raise with us as local officials their concerns. Even if we're not decision makers, we could accrue those concerns and incorporate them into our comments back. We have asked for an extension of 30 days beyond that October 13th date, because we don't feel that they've given us adequate time to digest and assimilate the variety of impacts that we may need to comment on. We don't know whether they're going to positively respond to our request or not.
So there's nothing that can be done. We have made that request for 30 additional days. And
well, we did share communications with the County of Kern and Bakersfield High School, several other entities who have an interest in the subject matter, and we do believe that they are going to send letters asking for the 30-day extension as well. The broader the base of that request, the more likely it is, I think, that they might honor it. And we, as the gentleman, Mr. Scott spoke earlier, we have one agricultural interest asking for a 6-month extension, and we don't know whether that will be honored either.
Right. Well, the deadline is approximately 30 days from now. So when do you expect to hear if there is going to be an additional extension?
I don't know.
I see. Wow, interesting. Yeah, thank you very much.
Councilmember Solis?
I'm sorry, I have one more question, kind of dovetailing off the Vice Mayor's question. Under the current EIR, if we were to request or suggest, moving the location of the station, can we do that under the current EIR?
Mayor, Councilmember Salas, you could, but that really wouldn't be an appropriate comment. Usually the comments that one makes on a NEPA EIS document is what are the deficiencies in the document itself. It's not simply to suggest another project or a different alternative or something along those lines. I don't think that the response to the comment would be very thorough.
Gotcha. So have we ever, I'm sorry, maybe you guys could get back to me after council or something, but I just wanted to know, have we ever looked at different locations, given that I've been around on the city council for the first times that this came through. But I would like an education just to know if we had ever studied or looked at different locations in the city of Bakersfield or on the outskirts of the city of Bakersfield.
We can provide you a longer-term answer to that question in writing later. The shorter-term answer to that question is, over the last 2 years in having specific meetings with the High-Speed Rail Authority, we've made any number of suggestions about tweaks to the alignment that would lessen the damage to either city facilities or facilities of public interest about which we share concern. And I don't think we saw any of them responded to in the document. We had gone in with engineers and specifically given them ideas about how they might use the red alignment through the BHS corridor, which impacted it less, and transition over into the blue alignment, which impacted East Bakersfield in a lesser manner. Basically, they said we'd lose time and we have obligations to get from LA to San Francisco in so many minutes. We can't lose 3 minutes. And they didn't incorporate any of our suggestions. So longer term, yes, long ago and far away, and we'll get you a summary of that.
Okay, thank you. But you said they've never included any of our suggestions?
There might have been a notation or two about the flying over the West Side Parkway, but with respect to the courtyard or the police garage or vast majority of the things we suggested to them were ignored.
All right, thank you.
This is a workshop item. It's recommended acceptance of this report. Vice Mayor Couch, please, for a motion of acceptance.
Move acceptance of the report. Thank you.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved with Councilmember Hansen absent.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.